All right, Windows users, we're going to get Python set up and some tools that we'll use in addition to Python setup in this video. So the first thing we're going to do is download Python. Now there's actually many ways of installing Python. We can do what we're going to do from python.org, download Python. We can do it from the Windows Store. You can do it from the command line from a prompt. But again, we're doing it from python.org. You can find the link as a resource with this video. We're going to go to downloads, and then it's going to suggest the most recent stable build for us. It's pretty likely you'll see something slightly different, not a problem whatsoever. The differences are going to be pretty tiny, if there are any that you'll be able to notice. So anyways, we're going to click download. We'll wait for that to finish, and then we open up the file. We see this installer. There's a couple things. First, we want to check this box that says add Python to path. So we're going to click that, and then we're just going to click install now. Yes, we'll allow it to make changes. All right, so it looks like we finished. Setup was successful. There is this little message here. It says disable path length limit. I'm actually going to click that. It's going to make it easier to install this other tool called IPython. Anyway, I'm going to click yes. And now setup was successful. We can close out of here. Okay, so we now have Python installed. If we go down to our start menu, and if you type Python, we now have an application called Python 3.10 in my case. I can open that up, and I'll get this window here. Keep scrolling a bit, zoom in. This is interactive Python. So if you remember, we talked about different ways of running Python interactively from a file. I'm looking at interactive Python, and let's do some basic math. 1 plus 2, we get 3. Awesome. We successfully have Python running on our machine. And the last thing I'll show before we move on to our next step is I can get out of here by typing exit with parentheses, and it goes away. Next up, we're going to install our editor, which is VS Code or Visual Studio Code. You can use any editor really, but the reason we're using this, and I'm having you install it now, is because there's Python tools, there's some built-in Python integrations, so it's just an easier experience, but you don't have to use this to write Python code. So I'm going to download for Windows, and did it start the download? I don't need to, oh, it did start. All right, well, I'm downloading multiple versions now. All right, we'll open that up. And we wait a moment. Okay, accept the agreement. You can install there, that's fine. Great. I recommend checking these. Add open with code action. We'll see that later. You don't have to do it though, it's not critical. And then we'll click install, and I'll be back when it finishes. All right, finished. Sure, we'll have it launch Visual Studio Code automatically for us. And here it is. Great. Let me just make this a bit larger. Okay, so now we're going to use VS Code to create a very simple Python script. I'm going to make a new file. So it's just a text editor. I can do file, new file. I can do Control N. It doesn't really matter where we save this. I'm just going to do it on my desktop and then probably delete it. So, and I'm going to call it, how about first.py? It doesn't even have to have .py, but that's going to make it easier for VS Code to realize that we're writing Python in here. And it should immediately pop up with something saying, do you want to install the recommended extensions for Python? So it detected that .py, and we'll say install. So it should automatically install. These are things like autocomplete, code debugging, highlighting, all sorts of different features that have to do with Python that are nice. So it might take a little bit. It's 50 megabytes, but once it finishes, all right, there we go, finished up. It's going to tell me, all right, you probably want to install Python. The thing is, we actually have installed Python. It just doesn't know about it. What we need to do is select a Python interpreter, basically which version. And as soon as I click that right here, it shows me my versions. I only have one. You might have multiple. Maybe there's Python 2. Maybe you installed Python earlier, 3.8 or 7 or something. Any of those will work. Not Python 2, but any Python 3 version. I'm going to select that. So now I have activated Python within VS Code. It knows that I have Python installed. And I can close out of here. And I can write some very simple Python code. I'm just going to write print hello world, just like that. I'll zoom in a bit. We're going to learn all about code. That's the whole point of this course, but I'm going to put a single line in there, and then I'm going to save it. Control S. And now I'm going to execute it. I'm going to hit this little play button. And it worked. You can see my output right there. So it opened up a terminal for me here, and it executed my file using Python. And we just went through those steps to tell VS Code about Python, that we have it installed, which version, where it is. And it automatically, whenever I click that play button, will run this file as a Python file. So if we tweak this a little bit, goodbye world, and hit play, there we are, goodbye world. So one final thing I'm going to do is install a tool called IPython. Now IPython is interactive Python. It's just a better interactive version of Python. So the way that we install this is unfortunately a little clunkier. I'm going to open up command prompt and zoom way in here. You don't need to know anything about the terminal or command prompt. That's okay. I'm going to type pip install IPython. So we have to install it from the command line like this, pip space install space IPython. And it will take a little moment. It's going to go download whatever it needs and hopefully install it without any issue. If you do run into issues, it's not a big deal. You already have Python on your machine. You can use that instead of IPython. It's exactly the same in terms of the Python that it's running. It's just going to look a little tiny bit different, but it looks like it worked for me. You see a bunch of text, and now we can test it out if I run IPython, just like that, IPython. Now I have a different prompt where I can type Python code, and you'll see that it's color-coded. That's just one minor change. I have autocomplete and a bunch of other features. But again, it's just a nice to have. It's not required. So to get out of here, I can type exit in parentheses, and let's just compare. If I do regular Python, I do 1 + 1. We get the same answer. We get 2. It's just not color-coded. It looks a little different. So if IPython did not install for you, it is not a problem. But it is what I'm going to be using throughout the course when I'm showing interactive mode. It's just easier to see as a student, right? We've got the separation, the color coding, the spacing. It's just easier to make sense of than this. And that is the end of our installation. So if you need to open interactive mode and you have IPython installed, you need to go down to your command prompt, open that up, and type the word IPython. And now we have IPython. I can exit out of here with exit parentheses. Now, if you don't have IPython installed or you don't want to use it, there's an easier option. You can just type Python and open up Python immediately. No middleman, just go straight to Python. And we've got Python here, and I can exit with the same thing, or I can hit the X. And then when we're running code from a script, we write our code in a .py file. Let's add a bunch of exclamation points. And then actually, let's multiply this by 99. Save the file, and then hit the play button. And there's my results. I get a whole bunch of text printed out. I executed the file as Python by hitting that play button. Okay,